EuroPhilantopics is like a date. It's a date between policymakers and practitioners, people who are good at using small resources in very effective ways, talking to policymakers who are short of resources and need to learn how to use small resources in effective ways. That's what this is about.
One of the things philanthropy can do is invest in long-term solutions and to go beyond the current political cycle. And so I think there is a sense in which bringing policymakers together with philanthropists allows people to say, well, okay, where are the things that policymakers, would like to be doing in the longer term to really solve some of these big problems, but they can't fund it. They can't get the funding for that at the moment. They can't mobilize people in the right way, and so can there be a partnership between the policymakers and the philanthropists to kind of tackle these more underlying fundamental problems that Europe faces?
It is important for foundations to think about intermediaries. Who can they use? Who has got the experience? Who's got the contacts to really get into the policy making process? Those kind of intermediaries, think tanks like the European Policy Center, but also some of the specialized foundations, some of the NGOs, some of the civil society organizations. I think these are the kind of intermediaries which can really help foundations to have an impact at the policy making level.
There's important power, influence in the philanthropic world, in the policy making world as well. But if they want a new narrative for Europe's citizens, we're not going to decide it in rooms like this. Ask the question, not only what are you frustrated about, but what should we do now to make it work? I think there's a lot of power perhaps among elites to convene that discussion and get out and break a pattern where elites are telling populations that they should know what's good for them.
If we want to change the world on a sustainable way, we also need a very good cultural background. Foundations have a very important role to play in the cultural institutions in Europe, because those institutions, it's difficult for them to survive because they don't have the money, they don't have the support of governments, so we need foundations to help them.
We've been talking about the big issues facing Europe. One of the biggest is immigration, and how can we have a new narrative? There's a pretty toxic, populist narrative out there about them and us. Too many of them taking our stuff. They're not like us, they don't want to be. We're not allowed to talk about it. But another reason we need a new narrative is the counter arguments to that often don't work. You don't beat an argument of them and us by saying they pay more in than they take out.
A lot of the defenders of open liberal migration policies tend to take it as a matter of fact that those policies are right, and they tend to be too dismissive of the fears of ordinary people. And I think there was a sense that it's very important that policymakers acknowledge that there are trade-offs and there are challenges in managing migration, and that actually people should have the permission to worry about that, but then to try and engage with managing those fears and answering the questions more specifically, rather than just taking it for granted that people who oppose migration are stupid, which seems to be the message that the elite often gives off.
What comes clearly out is that there are many people who are thinking about systemic change, who are thinking about the radical transformation we need to see, and who are willing to invest in that, but also see the shortcomings of what we have. So if we can harness that agreement, that power of thinking to actually change something on the ground, I think we will have made a lot of progress. Foundations need to move from project impact to policy impact.
The big challenge facing the European Union is not that some states are running deficits, it's not free movement of workers within the European Union, about which my fellow countrymen are currently becoming completely hysterical. It is growth and jobs, and we really need to refocus on growth and jobs, and we need to get policymakers to refocus on growth and jobs, and we need them to communicate to people around the European Union that we are actually going to do something about it rather than sitting around and fiddling.